This is session 3 of the land development training, and what we're going to talk about tonight is the feasibility and site analysis portion of our job. This is the portion of our job that our clients rely on us in order to help them minimize their risk early on in a development process or in a development project. It's not necessarily strictly for private sector clients. It can also be public sector when they're doing route alignments or road alignments. I've done very large-scale feasibility and site analysis for the government when they were looking at relocating different portions of the government and consolidating campuses and doing campus master plans with different agencies. That's a very big thing that government agencies do to try and make sure, obviously from a monetary standpoint, they have got to make sure that they're representing the taxpayers' dollars' best interest. So it's not uncommon to do very large feasibility and site selections process for institutions, whether it be colleges, other types of what you would typically call not necessarily just shopping centers and housing subdivisions, but other large users, which could be anything from power plants to public facilities, anything like that. So you kind of keep that in mind. We're not just talking about houses and grocery stores here. Even though that's a big part of what we do, that's not the only part. There's lots of other people that need our services. What we're going to talk about tonight is covered in the Land Development Handbook. Again, this is the new edition, the second edition. And that's pretty much what we're going to be following for the class. A lot of the things you'll see are similar from the old edition. You should be able to find some information, but I think they've done a good job of going back through the second edition and updating it and putting it a little bit more in the true terms of the process that we follow in our industry. So I think the outline, as they've improved the book, has improved as far as how things really work. So we're going to talk about feasibility and site analysis. One of the things we need to understand when we first start a project are the allowable uses of a site. We need to understand everything from comprehensive planning. Comprehensive planning stems from regulatory controls that really allow jurisdictions and municipalities and communities to govern how they want to grow in the future and really lay the groundwork. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're also going to talk about site plan ordinances, subdivision regulations, and building codes, those dreadful things that we have to confine ourselves in the spirit of creativity. There was an article on the front page of Washington Post a couple weeks ago where an engineer had roughly, I think, 8 acres to work with. They had to have an acre for each lot, but environmental constraints, the lots were laid out extremely odd. They were Z-shaped lots. They weren't contiguous. People's front yards were in their backyards. And I'm always kind of amazed at that because if you measure, there's an old adage that you will get what you measure. And in the case of many of our ordinances, they measure floor area ratio, they measure acreage. And for them to get something that doesn't measure common sense but measures a number, they shouldn't be surprised that those two oftentimes are in competition with each other. The other thing is we're going to talk about tonight is exactions, infrastructure enhancements, and fees. These are basically the tools that municipalities use to get the cost of development. A very popular one are typically school impact fees, where because of new homes being built, that creates a need for new schools, and therefore they try and collect the municipality or governing authority tries to collect some sort of monetary capital per unit based on a lot of statistical and really just number crunching of how many homes are in the community, how many students that generates. So you can actually come up with how many, I think in our jurisdiction it's around 0.52 children per household. So with every new house that comes online, every 2 houses generates 1 kid roughly in the school system. So then they can figure out how much it costs to build new schools, and they can actually transform that down to a mathematical formula to actually say how much it's going to cost to build that house and pay fees in order to be able to educate the children that are going to come from that house. There's everything from transportation and road. We're going to get into some of those lists, but anything really, if you think of it as you grow, that's not necessarily just a burden on the individual property, but how it affects the existing community. Real property law,